We're here with Representative Mike Hill. He's a lawmaker here in the great state of Florida. Representative Hill, thank you so much for being with us.
Alex, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So you have a very interesting piece of legislation dealing with abortion. Could you tell us a little bit about the bill, what motivated you to file it, and how it's looking right now?
Sure. Well, my motivation is because I believe that life begins at conception, that abortion is indeed unconstitutional, and it is killing a life, it's taking a life. And so because I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and inextricably tied to the Constitution is our Declaration of Independence. You cannot separate the two. The Declaration of Independence, we all recognize the phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Most people recognize that and they stop right there. The next sentence is just as important. And to secure these rights, government is instituted among men, deriving their just powers by the consent of the governed. And so because I am a government official now, and to be a part of my election, not only did I have to get votes from my constituents, I also had to say an oath of office. And that oath of office said that I do solemnly swear to protect and defend our Constitution. Now, when I said that oath, it wasn't just between me and the judge administering the oath, or even between me and my constituents. It was. But it goes further than that. That oath was between me and the living God. It was an act of worship. I was promising God that I'm going to protect and defend our Constitution. And because the Constitution is linked to our Declaration of Independence and gives government its right to even exist, the first one of those inalienable rights listed was life. And so if I take my oath seriously at all, then it is my duty to file legislation to protect life, because that is defending our Constitution and who we are as a being and as a society.
Interesting. And so the Supreme Court, they like to claim that they found in the penumbras of the Constitution this authority for overturning all of our laws criminalizing the murder of unborn children. What do you think of that argument? I mean, is there anything in the penumbras of the Constitution authorizing the murder of unborn children?
There is not. It was made up. The Supreme Court tied themselves into a pretzel to try and come up with that opinion. And by the way, that is all it is. It's an opinion. It doesn't mean that they have any force or means to enforce it upon the states. The states could accept it or reject it. And I think more and more states are recognizing that and are wanting to reject it. The Supreme Court has made so many wrong decisions and, very big issues in the past. I'm just surprised that Roe v. Wade decision hasn't been challenged more since it was first implemented in 1973. It is something that we have to remove, not just their decision, but their ability to try and make decisions which control what happens in states.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about your bill. What would your bill do to rectify this incredible wrong that was perpetrated by the Supreme Court?
Well, what we say in our bill is we started off with a number of whereases, so that there are 27 different whereases that are listed, so that the courts will not be able to try and determine or decide what did they mean when they were putting this legislation together. We make it explicit what we mean, and we spell out, one, that life begins at conception. We also spell out that life that we recognize as a society is with a heartbeat. And so my bill says that life begins at conception, that once that heartbeat is detected and we know that there is a life there, that baby cannot be aborted. There are no exceptions in my bill. No exception for rape, incest, human sex trafficking, the life of the mother being threatened, or if she has some mental, emotional distress. There are no exceptions in there. And the reason I removed those exceptions, let's just use the one rape and incest, that's a terrible situation. That's a tragic, horrible situation. But we must recognize that there is no life unless God is present. And so as horrible as that tragedy was of that mother being conceived after a rape, God decided that there's going to be life there. And who are we to tell God, you made a mistake, no, we're going to kill that baby? Yeah. No, God can turn a tragedy into a triumph. And there are so many instances, I'm seeing them speaking up and coming out, of mothers who did keep their baby in the event of a rape and are saying, I am so glad it was the best decision I ever made. And of course, this child who's now practically an adult saying, I'm glad too. So I have removed all exceptions. And what disturbs me with some heartbeat bills is they will have an exception in there for emotional or mental distress of the mother. Well, that just opens it wide up again, where she could say, hey, doctor, this is really stressing me out. Okay. And then they have the abortion. No, abortion should be treated for exactly what it is, and it is taking a human life, and we need to stop that.
Yeah. I always thought it was very strange that we imposed the death penalty on unborn babies who had absolutely nothing to do with the crime, and yet, we have discussions about whether, how we ought to treat criminals and things like that. It just always struck me as so strange. To talk on this abortion issue, I just wrote an article recently in the New American Magazine. The United Nations was very unhappy with our neighboring state, Alabama, because they passed a law also criminalizing the murder of unborn babies. And the UN said, no, you have a human right to murder your baby, and so the U.S. government needs to intervene here in Alabama and these other states that are passing similar legislation and force that state to allow the killing of unborn babies to continue. And they describe this as a human right. What do you think about that idea? They point to these international legal instruments that apparently have been signed by governments. And can they invent a human right to kill babies that trumps the right of the human to live?
No, there is no such right, and the UN is completely wrong on that. I would like to see the United States leave the United Nations, leave it completely. It is not fulfilling its function, which it originally was intended to do. I don't think it ever fulfilled that function, and it's just gotten further and further away from it. And I can't even imagine how you would enforce the United States government making a state say, yes, indeed, you are going to have abortions. Now let's take, for example, the case of the state of Arkansas, where they were trying to have segregated schools. And there was an action that the federal government took. They sent in the National Guard to allow the students to attend the schools. What action could you take to force someone that you must have an abortion that comes from the federal government? Are they going to have a guard at every abortion facility? And yes, you are going to have that abortion. No, it doesn't even make sense. So United Nations has completely gotten this wrong. We should ignore them, just like states should ignore unconstitutional, illegal opinions coming from the U.S. Supreme Court.
Excellent. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, and I know a lot of people now are starting to realize this, and it's especially interesting too because the liberals shriek about, oh, you can't do that, and then at the same time they're doing that, right? I mean, you have all these states now where they've legalized smoking marijuana in defiance of federal statutes. So on the bigger picture of states playing a role, kind of interposing between unconstitutional federal policies and the citizens of those states, what are your thoughts on that? There's some states that have been, I think, going out on a limb and saying, well, you can't have federal immigration enforcement in our state anymore. And I mean, what is a proper understanding of constitutional boundaries and federalism? What does that entail?
I think one of the first things that has to be recognized is what is it going to mean in terms of keeping us together as a union, as a United States. And it's already in our Constitution where it states that the federal government will determine immigration laws. So, and we know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So it's already there. So for a state to say we're going to have sanctuary cities, we're going to be a sanctuary state, they're going against the Constitution. They're going against what would keep us together as a United States, where we derive our power, where we derive our ability to function as a society, our economic strength, our military strength. I think it's important that we do remain together as a United States. And so when they flaunt federal law that has constitutional authority behind it, then they're in the wrong. Yeah. Now, that's as opposed to I'm hearing of some states or some cities saying we're going to be an abortion-free sanctuary city. They are not going against the Constitution, because there is nowhere in the Constitution that says a woman has a right to kill or murder a baby.